By the end of this video, I'm going to show you something. Proof that a man we've celebrated as a hero for 3,000 years actually sent 6 innocent men to their deaths. Knowingly, coldly, on purpose. Because Odysseus was not a hero. He was a manipulator who used his crew as pawns, whose ego got dozens of men killed. And today, I'm going to prove it, step by step. But first, I owe you something. If this channel is about tearing down the black and white hero myths that pop culture keeps feeding us, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, drop a like right now, because this is just the beginning, and things are about to get a lot darker. You already know the story. The war hero who outsmarted Troy, the man cursed by the gods, tossed around the seas for 10 straight years, who never gave up, the king who risked everything to get back to his wife, his son, his throne. Sounds noble, right? That's exactly why nobody looks twice. Because Homer tells us this story through Odysseus' own mouth. And have you ever stopped to think about how a killer tells his own story? Now let's pull that mask off together. And we're going to start small. So small that most people miss it completely. Right after leaving Troy, Odysseus and his men land on the shores of the Cicones at Ismarus. And here, with absolutely no need for war, they raid the city, they take the women, they take the goods, they take everything. His men beg him, "King, that's enough. Let's get back to the ships." But Odysseus doesn't listen. The plunder tastes too sweet. The result? The Cicones call for reinforcements, come back, and 6 of Odysseus' men die. On the very first stop, 6 lives. Gone before the journey even really begins. And this is just the start. Think about that for a second. A leader ignores his own men's warning, drags them into an unnecessary fight out of pure greed, and the price gets paid, not by him, but by the men under his command. Coincidence? Or the first step in a pattern? You're about to see the answer very clearly. Next stop, the island of the Lotus Eaters. Some of his men taste the lotus flower and instantly lose all desire to go home. Odysseus drags them back to the ship by force. At first glance, this makes him look like a responsible leader, right? But wait a second. Why did these men give up their desire to go home so easily? Maybe, somewhere deep down, they had already sensed this voyage was never going to end well. And right here, the true nature of this story starts to show itself. This isn't a journey home. This is the slow, silent destruction of a crew dragged along behind one man's ego. Now we arrive at the most critical turning point in the entire story. The cave of the Cyclops, Polyphemus. Odysseus and 12 of his men walk into that cave, and the giant starts eating them one by one. Odysseus comes up with a brilliant plan. He gets the giant drunk, blinds his single eye, and they escape the cave clinging under the bellies of sheep. Up to this point, genuinely brilliant. A real moment of heroism. But then comes the moment, the single moment that changes the entire course of the story. As their ship pulls away, Odysseus turns around and shouts, "It was Odysseus of Ithaca who blinded you." His name, his pride, his ego, all of it matters more than anything else. His men beg him, "Stop, my king, keep quiet, you'll get us all killed." He doesn't listen, and Polyphemus curses his father, Poseidon. He prays that Odysseus never makes it home, and if he does, that he arrives alone, having lost every single one of his men. There it is, the exact source of their 10-year nightmare. An ego that couldn't stay quiet for a few extra seconds during an escape. One decision, made for a moment of personal satisfaction, that sealed the fate of an entire crew. Sit with that for a second. A leader sacrifices his crew's lives for his own pride. Is this the first time? No. And it definitely won't be the last. Let's stop here for a second and catch our breath, because up ahead is the most damning piece of evidence in this entire video. And if you've made it this far, trust me, you need to stay until the end. What you're about to see changes everything you thought you knew about Odysseus. But before we go on, give me 1 second. If you're into this kind of deep dive analysis, make sure you're subscribed, because in upcoming videos, we're going to be putting a lot more heroes on trial. Now let's keep going. The wind god Aeolus gives Odysseus a gift, a magic bag holding every unfavorable wind trapped inside. Only the right wind is left free, and the ship gets so close to Ithaca that the island is finally visible on the horizon. But Odysseus makes a mistake, or maybe it isn't a mistake at all. Maybe it's a deliberate omission. He never tells his men what's inside that bag. He doesn't trust them, or he simply doesn't think they deserve to know. So while he's sleeping, his men assume the bag is full of gold, and they open it. Every wind bursts out at once, and the ship gets blown backward, straight into a massive storm, all the way back to where they started, right off the coast of Ithaca, so close they could practically see home. Now stop and really let that sink in. They were almost almost there, but Odysseus withheld the most critical piece of information from his own crew. No communication, no trust built, and once again, everyone pays the price together. This isn't a coincidence. This is a pattern, and that pattern is about to turn deadly. After this, they reach the island of the Laestrygonian giants. This time Odysseus plays it careful. He keeps his own ship outside the harbor, but he sends the other 11 ships straight in. Without a single warning, the giants hurl boulders, smashing the ships to pieces. They spear his men like fish. Only Odysseus's ship survives, because he was the one waiting outside. 11 ships, hundreds of men, gone in an instant, and Odysseus keeps himself safe. So I have to ask you, is this wisdom, or is this a self-preservation instinct that always puts other people's lives second? Because every single time there's danger, somehow he's the one who survives, and everyone around him keeps disappearing. When they reach Circe's island, the sorceress turns his men into pigs. Odysseus, with help from the god Hermes, manages to save them. But then what happens? He stays on that island with Circe for an entire year, a full year. While his men are desperate to get home, their king is spending his time in a goddess's arms. Eventually, his own men have to remind him, "My king, don't you remember? It's time to go home." Is that the behavior of a responsible leader, or a man who puts his own pleasure ahead of his crew's most urgent need? You already know the answer, and this pattern is about to reach a horrifying peak. Now we finally get to the moment I promised you at the very start of this video. Circe warns Odysseus. Ahead lie two dangers. On one side, Charybdis, a whirlpool that can swallow the entire ship whole. On the other, Scylla, a six-headed monster, but one that can only take 6 men. Circe is brutally clear about this. If they sail near Scylla, the monster will absolutely take 6 of his men. There's no way to prevent it. It's guaranteed. And here it is. The real proof. Odysseus receives this information. He knows, in advance, with total certainty, that 6 of his men are going to die. And he tells his crew nothing. In Homer's own text, we hear Odysseus's inner thoughts. He arms himself, stands on deck, even considers fighting the monster head on. But then he remembers Circe's warning and decides against it, because fighting could put the entire ship at even greater risk. So what does he tell his crew? Nothing. He doesn't mention Scylla. He doesn't prepare them. He doesn't give them any kind of choice. He just steers the ship straight toward the rocks. And when the monster strikes, 6 men are dragged screaming toward its jaws, calling out Odysseus's name as they die. Odysseus himself later calls it the most pitiful thing I ever witnessed with my own eyes. But all he does is watch. He does nothing, because he already knew this was coming, and he never made a single plan to warn them, or even prepare them for it. Now really sit with that. A captain knows in advance exactly who is going to die on his ship. And he keeps that information for himself, and himself alone. Why? Because telling them might have caused panic. Maybe a mutiny. Maybe nobody would have agreed to sail anywhere near Scylla at all. And here's the other thing. Odysseus never even got to choose which 6 men would die. The monster would simply grab whoever happened to be rowing closest, so he didn't even bother to think about who was sitting where. Who had children waiting at home? Who had a family depending on them? He just wanted to keep the rest of the ship, meaning himself, safe. It might look like a strategic decision on the surface, but underneath it's nothing more than a man quietly sacrificing other people's lives to protect his own interests. So think about that. A leader who lets other men die, unaware, unprepared, and completely defenseless. This isn't heroism. This is a calculated sacrifice. This is cold, deliberate manipulation, and when he finally arrives back in Ithaca alone, it isn't a triumphant homecoming. It's a man who left dozens of bodies behind him, being the only one who made it out alive. He set sail with 12 ships, hundreds of men, and he came home with none of them. This isn't the story of an epic hero. This is the story of a man fleeing the scene of his own crime. And there it is. You've seen it. Odysseus didn't survive because of his cunning. He survived by spending his crew's lives over and over again. He lost 6 men at Ismarus out of pure greed. He brought down a 10-year curse on himself because his own ego couldn't stay quiet in front of a blinded Cyclops. He shattered his men's trust by hiding a secret inside a bag of wind. He kept himself safe while 11 ships and hundreds of men were slaughtered. slaughtered by giants. And in the end, at the Strait of Scylla, knowing full well that 6 of his men were about to die, he said absolutely nothing and simply watched it happen. This is not the portrait of a hero. This is a documented case study of a narcissistic leader collapsing one decision at a time. If this analysis actually gave you something to think about, please subscribe to this channel, because this is only the beginning. There are so many more heroes hiding villains behind their myths, and honestly, one of them might be one of the most brilliant, most manipulative characters in the entire history of cinema. Picture a man like that, a man chasing his own past, his own guilt, a man who, in his desperate attempt to get home, knowingly, deliberately, traps everyone who trusted him inside a dream forever. Yes, you guessed it. I'm talking about Cobb from Christopher Nolan's Inception, and if you want to see exactly how he dragged his entire team into that nightmare, click the video right on your screen right now, because that story goes even deeper and even darker than everything you just watched.